What's going on, Grinders? Welcome to another edition of Grinders Live, the weekend edition, brought to you by DraftKings. I'm Boggslite, and I'm joined by my co-host Pepsi7. Pepsi, how's it going, man?
It is going great, man. We had a big night last night, nailed a pile of value picks, and I'm excited about tonight.
Yeah, unfortunately, for whatever reason, pitching still, even a month through the season, is as hard as,
Inconsistent.
inconsistent and hard
Yeah.
to figure out. But tonight there's a few picks that'll help me narrow it down to make it easier, in my opinion. But either way, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Who are your top starting pitchers tonight, Pepsi?
Well, it's another night where I don't love any starting pitcher. I'm not in love with any scenario. I think if you're cash games or even GPPs, I think Julio Teheran is probably your best pick. The guy's been pretty dominant this season. His Ks haven't been there in some of the games, but you assume that's going to come. The Giants are a weak hitting club. Their average is third worst in the NL, but they don't strike out a whole lot. I guess that's why I'm not in love with it. I believe in Toronto to a certain point. I just don't think he's elite either. And that top six lineup of the Giants really isn't that bad. They should really have a better average. I mean, you're talking Pagan, Pence, Posey, Morse, Belt, and Sandoval. It's a pretty solid top six. I don't know why they're not hitting better, but Giants have never been a good hitting team, regardless of who they threw out there, it seems. But I still think Tehran's your best option there. Like I said, I'm not in love with it or any other pitcher tonight, really, but he's just safest bet. Um, Cueto, probably number two for me. Again, Cueto's been outstanding this season. He's been dominant. The Ks have been high. He's been absolutely incredible. But I expect a little bit of regression. Certainly not a fluke. Cueto is elite, but the Ks are what I mean by regression. I think that comes down a little bit. He's pitching in a hitter-friendly park. It's a solid Milwaukee team. They are missing Braun. They got some big K guys in that lineup. So, it's just that his price is so expensive on most sites. I don't really want to pay it for a guy that probably goes 7 or 8 innings and only gives us 5 Ks tonight. That's generally been what he is. But the way he's going this year and looking at that Brewers lineup, there are some Ks in there. So hard to say. For me, it's mostly price as to why I'm off of him, and he's my number two guy, and I prefer Tehran just to save that money. Laureano's an option, I guess, more GPP than anything. This Jays team's hitting really well, and I mentioned to a guy in chat yesterday why I was on Garrett Cole, and that's why. This Jays team could hit, and their bullpen's awful. Their starting pitching most of the time is awful, but this team can hit, regardless of where they are or who they're facing. So don't really like Laureano. A couple of middle-tier guys, if you're looking, I'm strictly talking GPPs here because I don't think you can trust them in tonight's situation in cash games, but Tanner Rourke has been really good. Much better pitcher against righties, and that Philly lineup can be loaded with some lefties tonight. So I don't love it, but he's definitely playing GPPs. Garrett Richards is another guy in GPPs that I like. This kid's been outstanding this year. He's got a hold of his control issues. He throws in the high 90s, and he's got a lot of movement. He's a tough kid to hit. The Rangers have never really hit him. And I read on ESPN there last night, I was talking to Boggs a little bit about this last night, that Garrett Richards has the second least line drives hit off him all season, any pitcher in baseball. So guys are just not squaring up Richards, whether it's his velocity or the movement on his pitches or his command that's been exceptional this year for the most part. He's been a tough pitcher to hit. So I like him in GPPs. Hard to trust him in cash games, and Boggs could probably break it down a little better because he sees this kid pitch all the time. But that Rangers lineup is dangerous. I mean, they got a lot of good lefties in that lineup, especially later on. When you get rid of the Chews, Beltrais, Fielder, and Rio studs, you still got a Mitch Moreland lefty, Leonis Martin lefty. These guys are solid hitters too, so it scares me enough in cash games that I'll be off Richards. And there's not a whole lot else I like. There's another guy that Boggs mentioned that I'm not going to let you talk to him about. I'm intrigued by him as well. Out in Arizona and San Diego between McCarthy and Kennedy. Both are solid options, I think, tonight. But, again, for cash games, I'm not so sure. So I'll hand it to you, Boggs, let you break down Richards a little better for us as to why maybe you do or don't like him, and also talk about that Arizona game because I know you got to get out there as well.
Yeah, okay. We're going to start off with Richards. If you're playing on an efficiency site, this kid has been absolutely just spectacular to start the year. He's got his prices come up. And if you're playing on a site that is so win dependent, say like FanDuel, I'd be hesitant to use a guy like Richards, especially in cash games, because the Angels, they're depleted with injuries. They're going to have C.J. Cron, first baseman prospect, be making his debut tonight. They've got no Hamilton, they've got no Cole Calhoun, and they've got no Josh Hamilton, or I'm sorry, and no David Freese after he fractured his hand just last night on a pitch that he took off the hand. So I'm a little hesitant that Richards won't get the win, but going back to exactly what you said, this kid's been absolutely unbelievable. The most hits he's given up is in one start versus a tough Oakland team, in which he gave up 8. But aside from that, his last game he gave up 3 hits, 1 hit the game before, 1 hit the game before Oakland, and only 3 hits. So on an efficiency site that takes away points for every hit and walk you give up, I think that Richards is a solid option in GPPs tonight. He's going to get his Ks. They're going to come through this Rangers lineup. And while you mentioned that it is pretty tough, Richards in a GPP is definitely in play for me tonight. Just so much upside. Got to get that run support and hope that bullpen can keep the lead if you're playing him over on a site like FanDuel. But like I said, on an efficiency site, he's definitely one of my top options. My top option is going to be Tehran tonight. On our sponsor DraftKings at 10,800, not a price that's going to break the bank for you. It'll be somewhat difficult to work in Richards and Tehran, but it won't be impossible because there's a ton of value over on that site tonight. And talk about efficiency. That's what this guy is. He's not a guy that really racks up the Ks, but he is definitely someone that can take care and breeze through this Giants lineup, especially since I believe he's going to get a ton of run support tonight with Vogelsong as his counterpart. So on a site, say like FanDuel, either way, all across the board, Tehran's my number 1 option, and I think he's in a good place for a win. I think he's going to go deep into that game, and he'll get his strikeouts because the Giants are striking out 4th most in baseball against right-handed pitching. So there's a few Ks that could be had scattered throughout that lineup, and either way, Tehran is my number 1 option. I'm with you on Cueto. Not so high on him tonight. He obviously is the most expensive pitcher on the board, and he is, has been great, like you mentioned. But this Brewers team has also been probably the biggest surprise of this season. I think they have the best record in baseball, and they're finding ways to win games. And they're getting quality pitching, and on top of that, Cincinnati isn't hitting behind Johnny Cueto. So I'm not so high on Cueto tonight, despite the fact that he can pitch at home in that pitcher's park. I would much rather lean towards a Tehran as my top option. And going down to your point, or to talk about McCarthy a bit, I love him tonight over on a site like FanDuel, where you're not docked for hits, and you just pretty much target the K and the win and innings pitched. I wrote about him in my Daily Plays article today. I think he's got a great price over there. But on an efficiency site, say like our sponsor DraftKings, despite the $6,600 tag, he's going to give up hits. This Arizona team has been pretty inconsistent, especially offensively. So he's a guy that if they're not making plays defensively, if they're not turning those double plays that he likes to induce when he does give up those hits, McCarthy is someone that would be more of a GPP option for me on a site like DraftKings. But you look at his last outing, 12 Ks and 7 innings pitched. That's a pretty good outing, and you look at his stats so far this year, and you may say you're freaking crazy, Boggs. He's got over 5.5 ERA. He's 0-5, but you look at where he's had to pitch. He hasn't been able to pitch in one pitcher's park so far this season. All of his games have been at home, and his 2 road starts have been at the Cubs, which I believe was a day game, and at Colorado. So he's going to get his first crack in a nice, spacious ballpark. Probably won't give up too many home runs. And you look at the way this Padres team's been hitting. Good God, they made Bronson Arroyo look like Cy Young last night.
Exactly.
So those are my top 3. I would, like I mentioned, hesitate against using McCarthy on an efficiency site. And the one guy I would turn to is probably my number 3 on DraftKings tonight would be Tanner Roark, who you mentioned. This kid's the real deal. I admit I wasn't so high on him. I wasn't as bullish as I should have been to start the year, but this kid's got incredible stuff. And I remember it's haunting me now. That one comment you had on one of our previous shows, how you said no one has gotten a hit off his slider. No right-handed batter has gotten hit off his slider. Now
Right, all year, yeah.
you look at the Phillies. They've countered with four lefty bats to start to open the game against him, and they've got Cody Ash and Dominic Brown in there. But either way, if he can get through Chase Utley in that top of that order, I think Tanner Roark could be in for a big game, and would be more of a GPP play for me. So those are my top pitchers. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, you did mention that the Giants is strikeout fourth most in in baseball versus righties. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Because I'm looking at that right now, and I show the Giants like third last against in strikeouts in the National League, and I show them 20th in strikeouts versus righties.
Versus righties, I looked at
Yeah.
it just this morning, and
Okay.
they
I
were
didn't even put
striking
it in
out
the
over
spot
20.
here, but I heard that and I went, really? Because I'm pretty sure I looked that up and what the Giants are striking out. So I double checked on MLB.com here, and it's showing me they're 20th in the league in strikeouts versus righties.
Well, let me double check this right now. But
Yeah. That just kind of threw me off, and I'm thinking, okay, one of us has got some incorrect information here.
yeah, if you want to touch on Rourke a little bit more while I pull this up, and
Yeah.
I'll definitely find it.
Rourke's a good young kid. He's not a big strikeout guy. He's more of a control guy, and he hasn't scored on, I believe it's 18 innings now. The stretch is going, but he's the guy that, like Bog says, he basically since and last year anyway, he hadn't given up one hit with his slider to a right-handed batter. So I'm sure he has this year at some point. I haven't tracked it, but the kid's a good young pitcher. He's solid. I don't expect a big game out of him today. I think he's a GPP play only, and the lefties will get to him. He's going to dominate righties. He's been pretty solid against lefties too during the stretch, but at some point the lefties will get to him, and I'm a little bit worried with some of these Philly left-handed bats in there tonight. With Utley and Rollins and Howard and Dominic Brown and even a guy like Cody Ash. These guys can hit Rollins. So not so much Tony Gwynn leading off, but it's enough to scare me away from cash games. And one of the guys mentioned it there. The pitching's been so horrible recently. It's just that you can't seem to trust anybody. It's almost like you want to go GPP style and load up your offense. And I kind of agree with him to that. So I've looked into Richards. I've looked into McCarthy. I've looked into Rourke. And I still think you're safest with Teheran, even though I don't love him. I'm still not convinced that's the guy I'm going to roll in cash games. But, we're just trying to give you all the information. And I think Rourke's a solid option, but I'm a little nervous in that ballpark against those lefties and probably would prefer a Richards or a McCarthy to him. But, I think all three in play, if you want to roll the dice and not go with Cueto or Teheran, will be heavily owned. And like I said, this Giants team doesn't strike out that much, I think. Am I right, Boggs?
No, you're wrong. I've got it pulled up here. According to Fangraphs, as a team in 2014 versus right-handed pitching,
right,
they strike out the fourth most in baseball at 24.5% of the time.
Oh, you're going percentage. I'm going strikeouts, so that's right too. When you compare per bat,
yes,
MLB.com's kind of misleading. I got you. I
mean, they face a lot of lefties this year.
Okay.
I understand it, but yeah, I mean, percentage of the time relative to, I think that's the best way to kind of break it down.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're 20th against righties, but means nothing because they've hardly faced them. So there you go. So they are striking out. So that increases Teheran's chances, I think, tonight. I'm still a little nervous about that matchup. Some of the Giants have hit them pretty good too, like Posey being one of them, and a few of them have decent numbers. It's a small sample size, of course, and Teheran's been incredible basically since the end of last season until now. So it's again, like we've gone through. It's just one of those nights where I don't love anything and a lot of Teheran action. So in GPPs, I think he's an easy fade. Cash games, it's one of those things where if you don't go with him and your pitcher isn't great, you're 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 points behind. That's tough to make up with your batter. So he's still the safest play of the night, Box.
Well, talk to me about two guys we haven't mentioned, AJ Burnett and Giovanni Gallardo. Are any of those guys in play for you tonight?
No. Burnett's looked a lot better. I guess I wouldn't mind him tonight, and that's another reason why I'm off of Rourke, because Burnett has been solid, but it's just he's inconsistent. He hasn't pitched that great at home. It's a bandbox. I think Washington can hit. They got a solid lineup there too. I don't love it. I think that because their prices too are a little ahead of guys like Rourke, McCarthy, and Richards, I tend to go down to one of those guys. I think he's on the same page as those guys, a middle tier guy, but his price is too high for me. Although he's capable of throwing a decent game with K's. And Gallardo too. I don't believe in Gallardo. I just don't believe he's going to get hit at some point. His K's are not up there like they've been the last couple of seasons when he was dominant. Obviously not last season, but the years before that, he was getting 200 Ks a season. His numbers were half decent. But his ratios are solid, and his Ks aren't there. And I don't know. I just don't want to believe in him. The Reds have always hit him pretty good, so that's another one that kind of scares me. I won't be touching either Burnett or Gallardo at these prices. Would you?
Okay, well, it's really tough for me because we did say, how Cleveland was really struggling with the bat against lefties, and they were due for a big breakout game.
Yeah,
And sure as shit, last night they poured on 12 runs. I don't think that Cincinnati is as bad as they've been so far this year,
I
and that's
agree.
another team that just really scares the crap out of me because they're just due for one of these huge monster games. You know, they do have Brandon Phillips back in that lineup, and talk about another guy that a team made look brilliant last night. Cincinnati made Willie Peralta look, oh my God, Roger Clemens. It was unbelievable. But um, if I had to choose between Gallardo and Burnett, not that anyone has to or should have to, I would lean towards Burnett. Uh, you've got a Washington team that one of their biggest bats in Adam LaRoche is really banged up. He's got a sore quad, I believe it is, and he had to leave the game last night. So he's probably not swinging it with authority. And then you've got a lot of high K guys like Danny Espinosa in there. Rendon is a much better guy against left-handed pitching. Worth can K, and Ian Desmond hasn't really been hitting the ball well as well. So I would lead towards Burnett. I really haven't figured out if I'm going to play him tonight, but he has been pretty good. And it seems like once he left that Yankee Stadium and went to uh, Pittsburgh last year, things just kind of turned around for him. And the numbers are there, the Ks are there. He outdueled McCarthy. I mentioned his great game. He was even better against a tough Arizona team in a hitter's park. Didn't even give up an earned run in 8 innings pitched. So hasn't given up more than 2 earned runs in his last 4 starts. I think Burnett's definitely worth a look. But I would definitely lean towards Tehran and Richards, and if you can't get those guys in there, then perhaps go down to a Burnett, especially on an efficiency site. On a site like FanDuel, I'm more inclined to either pay up for Tehran or go down to a McCarthy or Richards, perhaps in a GPP. But definitely, I think he's worth consideration by the way he's been pitching of late. So that's what I've got. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, I would agree that Burnett is the better play of those two. And somebody else was asking about Ian Kennedy. I like Ian Kennedy. I thought he was a much better pitcher than he showed last year. However, I think he's pitching a little over his head this year. I think that's a pitcher's duel. I think both those pitchers, McCarthy and Kennedy, are in play tonight. I like them both. Kennedy facing his old team, and I know Boggs probably thinks that a few of them know him pretty well and he might get hit a little bit. But I expect that to be a pretty low-scoring game, and I'm perfectly fine with playing either Kennedy or McCarthy. I think they're about the same. I might give a slight edge to McCarthy just because of how bad that San Diego offense is. Like you said, Arroyo looked like Cy Young pitching against him. So slight edge to McCarthy, but I'm fine with Kennedy tonight if you want to use him at GPP. What do you think of Kennedy?
Well, the only problem is he's so hit or miss, and it's a good point that you brought up GPP only because this guy he gets in trouble when he starts to walk people. That's really been his Achilles heel over the last couple seasons, and what ultimately had Arizona ship him off to San Diego for practically nothing. You don't trade a guy in your own who was at one point your ace and a Cy Young contender for a bag of baseballs to a division rival if you think there's any hope that he can turn things around. And while he has been proving doubters wrong so far this season, I think he's a blow up waiting to happen. And it is a nice pitcher's park. I can see him having a decent game tonight because Arizona's been so inconsistent offensively. But he's a guy that I would be very hesitant to roster and definitely would only do so in a GPP. One more guy I want to bring up before we move along to our position hitters. R.A. Dickey. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, man, and there's a bit of rain in that game too. It's the only game, guys, I want to mention that has any issues. It looks like it's going to play fine. It looks like there shouldn't be maybe a little delay at the beginning. That's about it. Otherwise, everything else is fine. R.A. Dickey, man. I mean, he's just been so inconsistent. I can't trust the knuckler. Is it going to dance? Is it not going to dance? You know, these Pirates haven't hit him too, but at the same time, it's when he was a Met and he was have those two outstanding seasons is when he really faced these guys. So it's hard to look at BVPs and go, he's just a guy I can't trust, and his price isn't dirt cheap. And I think the Jays can score a bit, but Laureano is also his opponent. I wouldn't surprise if he pitched well. So for me, it's one of those things. He might not get the win. He might not pitch well. There could be a bit of rain there. He's not that cheap, and he's just been so inconsistent that I'm off of him. I'm just passing completely in all game types on Dickey.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely too risky. I would never, ever, ever play R.A. Dickey. I don't care if he's thrown 3 no-hitters in a row in a cash game, because it all comes down to whether that knuckler's dancing. And if it's not, it's going to be a long game for Dickey.
T-ball.
Oh, yeah. You did mention the rain. I'm not really sure how that affects his grip on the ball, because he obviously grips it a little bit differently. But if the ball is wet, he throws a hard knuckleball, which is really a unique pitch that really he pretty much developed and resurrected his career with. But I'm not sure how a rain affects that. I will say that I do like taking Dickey when he's outdoors and the wind's blowing in his face, because then the ball will hang up there and knuckle a little bit more. But he's definitely someone I would only consider in a GPP, and I would not play him on an efficiency site, because the walks and if that knuckler's not dancing, the hits are gonna come. It's just it's an inevitable part of how he pitches. But he can go deep into games, and even if I don't think that game's gonna get delayed at all, but he's one of probably the few starting pitchers in the league that probably wouldn't come out of a game if it was, say, delayed for a little bit, because it doesn't take much for him. That's why he can go deep into games and throw a lot of pitches. So it's all going to come down to whether his knuckler's dancing, and that's not a risk I'm willing to take tonight, especially with several other options that I feel more comfortable with.
Agreed.
All right, well, let's move on to catcher then.
Catcher tonight. Okay, we're looking at, for me, William Rosario is not playing tonight, so those of you who have not seen the Rockies lineup, obviously he's always a great play, but Rosario is not in the lineup tonight, so we're going to pass on him. Buster Posey's the guy facing Tehran. You guys think, okay, that's not a good matchup, and I tend not to play batters, even if they're studs, against aces. But Posey's hit Tehran really well. It's only 6 at bats, but I believe he's 4 for 6 off and something like that with a homer. So he's a guy that maybe is a good GPP play. Other than that, I mean, I'm looking at guys but more middle tier depending on your site pricing. Evan Gattis is a guy I think could go off against Boggslite. Boggslite's been awful basically this year, other than one start, and at the end of last year wasn't very good either. And really, he's just not that good of a pitcher in my opinion. So I think Gattis is in play. I like Miguel Montero today. Kennedy is very homer prone. He's always one of the top guys in giving up the dong. So Montero, as we know, swings for the fences all the time. Has a nice lefty-righty splits. I like him. Soltomaki is a guy that's in play too for me tonight. Better left-handed, but Paul Maholm, I mean, this guy serves up a lot of long balls. So I think Soltomaki is in play.
Soltomaki is not in the lineup. Sorry.
Oh, he's not as well. Okay, great. Thank you. I was going to mention Salvador Perez as well, but he's also not in the lineup tonight.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of catchers sitting it out tonight. So it's not a lot to choose from. So you look at a Gattis, Montero for your top guys, in my opinion. And then basically, if you're going to punt catcher, there's a few really dirt cheap options. I've noticed a few cheap guys like Brett Hayes and Olivo are in the lineup, but I'm not recommending them. I'm just saying there will be a lot of punt options if you're looking to completely punt it. You end up with 3 or 4 options probably, but I would go right to the Mets, and I would look at a guy like Anthony Recker. I think he's in a good spot. He's batting 6. He's in Coors Field, which is obviously always good, and he's facing lefty Franklin Morales, who's not a great pitcher. Recker's a right-handed bat, so he gets the split. So if you're going to punt, I definitely like Recker, and I also like Boggs' boy as well. Ryan Pena batting for the Reds tonight. Gallardo is the guy that will go up the home run. It's a homer's park. He's got the splits as well, batting 7. I think if you're going to punt catcher, I would go Pena or Recker. And if you got to go dirt cheap, like I said, there are other options out there. You're going to have probably 3 or 4 options for punting catcher completely with all these other guys that aren't playing tonight in Rosario and Perez and Salty.
Yeah. I just finished writing my article, got everything dialed in, posted it, and the Kansas City lineup came out, and Perez was out, and he was my top option of the night. I just thought he was going to be in an incredible spot, likely going to be batting cleanup against a weak lefty and Drew Smiley, but turns out he's not in the lineup. If there was one guy that I would pay up for, you mentioned him, it's probably Miguel Montero tonight. in a cash game or GPP. I recommended him more as a GPP play, but that's just because of how inconsistent everyone has around him has been. And this guy, he can draw a walk. He's probably going to be batting cleanup. That lineup is out, and he is batting cleanup.
Yeah.
So guys like Parra and Prado, they do their job getting on base. And if Goldie's not going to drive him in, Montero's going to have those opportunities. Now, with that, I agree with you that if you're not one of the in the mold that likes to pay up for catcher, tonight is a great night to punt the position and look to some of the cheaper options. Starting with my boy, I guess, Brian Pena. Not my favorite player in the world by any means, but you talk about a punt position that can hit you a bomb or two even. Brian Pena is a guy that's just one of the better hitters on that team, and really the only one that's been producing, at least for hitting for power on that. Surprisingly now powerless Cincinnati Reds team, and he'll once again be batting in that batter's ballpark against a guy like Gallardo, who you mentioned. Isn't necessarily a strikeout guy. Tends to pitch to contact occasionally. Likes to try and get through the game. But I think Pena's in a good spot for his moderate price. And at only $2,900 actually on our sponsor DraftKings, I think he makes for a great value play. Going down a bit, if you're looking to absolutely totally punt the position, you got guys like Brian Holiday. Haven't seen the Padres lineup yet. You got Grandal batting fourth as well against Brian McCarthy. But one guy that in a GPP who I think is definitely going to fly under the radar just because no one knows him is Tony Sanchez for Pittsburgh. This is a guy who I know well. I went to Boston College for a year. He's out of Boston College. This kid was the ACC Player of the Year, and that's not easy to do in a conference that has teams like North Carolina, Miami, and Florida State, to name a few. This kid did it all. Was a four-year guy. Always had a better bat and wasn't necessarily known for his defense. But if, like we mentioned in the GPP, if old Ari Dickey's knuckler isn't going, it could be a long night for him. And you got a guy batting seventh. He's been doing it. He's been pretty clutch hitting all season long. And at a bare minimum price, pretty much across the industry, that's a guy that I'm going to be taking a risk on tonight in my GPPs, and especially since he won't be highly owned in favor of some of these other guys like Brian Holiday, people might know a little better. So that's a guy, an ultimate punt that I would consider. You obviously, on a site like FanDuel, could take a guy like Olivo, who's been putting together a nice couple games in his early stint with the Dodgers, going back to a place that he knows well in Miami. But for me, my top punt option is going to be old Tony Sanchez. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't mind Sanchez. He has had a lot of big league experience, and not a lot of guys know a lot about him because he hasn't had much of that info on him. But, yeah, like you said, he's got a good track record. He was a prospect. It's one of those things where you just don't really know if he hits the knuckleball or not. But if it's not moving tonight, he could have a big game. And I kind of like the idea of taking the punt catcher versus Dickey. I mean, and just hoping that, hey, if the knuckler's not on, you can get a couple of big hits there. And when you get in that Jays bullpen, it's awful. So why not? I mean, if it's on, hey, you punted the position anyway. So if your guy goes over 3 Ks, you're not too worried about that. That's a total punt. So not a bad idea to punt off Dickey tonight.
Yeah, and then he's got Starling Marte batting in front of him. And I think, we'll get to these guys in a bit. Once they get on base, I think they're going to be off to the races. I know that Dickey can be quick to the plate, but if that knuckler is, if it's in a hitting count, hit and runs, they're all going to be in play. So I think Marte can get on base, steal second, and Tony Sanchez could get up if with the guy in running scoring position, a couple of times, and a couple doubles here and there. If you're looking for a position to punt and you want a little scarcity, I think everyone's going to be on record, who you mentioned, and in order to gain that ledge in a GPP, I think Tony Sanchez could be my guy. But enough about him. Let's move on to first base. Who are you liking at first base tonight?
First base, I'll point out that Justin Morneau is not playing for the Rockies as well. It was probably going to be a popular pick tonight. He's not on the board tonight, so avoid him. I think number one guy tonight for me is Freddie Freeman. This is a guy who smashes right-handed pitching, has hit Boggslite really well, is at his best when he's facing righty in Turner Field, which he is tonight. I think that he has a big game. I know he's been slumping a little bit, but his price has come down, so we get to get him at a discount tonight. So he's my number one guy there. Joey Votto's a guy I like as well. He's hit Gallardo well. and he's a great cash game play. Maybe he doesn't have the GPP upside because he doesn't seem to be hitting for much power these days, but always a great cash game play tonight. Um, Adrian Gonzalez, I think, is in play as well. Always flies under the radar. He's pretty expensive right now, but he's a guy that nobody ever seems to roster. And he's certainly capable of having 4 or 5 RBIs in that lineup and hitting a home run, even if it is in Miami tonight. So I like Agon as well. Pujols, I think, is in play, obviously, against Matt Harrison. The Angels should be able to score some runs. Boggs mentioned it's a pretty, depleted lineup. But Pujols has been hot. He's certainly turned it around since the start of this season. And he's a guy that can obviously hit a couple of dongs there. I like him. And then I don't really like a whole lot in the middle tier. Maybe a Ryan Howard against Tanner Rourke because Rourke does have lefty issues, but I'm not a Howard guy, so there's not a whole lot for me to recommend there. I would basically go with Freeman for me. I don't mind a Votto or a Pujols or Adrian Gonzalez, but for me it's either Freeman or I punt right down to Billy Butler, who's starting to hit the ball better, smashes lefties. I know he struggled this year again, but again, every star struggles at some point. This guy's a real good hitter. He's batting cleanup. He's facing a lefty and Smiley, and he's owned Smiley in his career so far. It's a small sample size. I'm going to get the exact numbers here. I think it's 6 for 7 or something like that off of Smiley. But there's a guy starting to roll. His price really hasn't come up a whole lot. He's 5 for 6 off of Smiley with a double. So, it's a small sample size, but when you're getting on base almost every time you've seen a guy in a couple of games, you're doing something right. So if you don't want to pay up for Freeman, I'm perfectly fine with the punt rate to Butler, and I wouldn't do a whole lot in between, Bucks.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you on Freeman a little bit. You may have talked me into him a little bit more. My top play in the article I wrote today, more so I guess on FanDuel than on a site like our sponsor DraftKings, was Miguel Cabrera, and for obvious reasons. There's really not much. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Miguel Cabrera. He's the best hitter in baseball, and he's starting to turn things around. But you take a look at Freeman on our sponsor DraftKings. He's over $1,000 less. And you did mention he's slumping. I think he has something like 3 hits in his last 7 games, but he's still batting 300, and his OPS is well over 900. And he's going to get those RBI opportunities. And you mentioned the matchup's great at home, where the ball can fly against a guy like Boggslite, who's clearly lost a step after what looked like a resurgence in his career. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you on Freeman. Definitely on him, and the same with Votto. I would probably peg Votto just the way both have been hitting as more of a cash game play and a little safer, but I don't think has the same upside as a guy like Freeman. So if you're looking at a GPP, I would lean Freeman, cash game Votto, and this is if you can't afford Miguel Cabrera, who's my top option in either cash games or GPPs tonight. And then going to your Billy Butler point, I think that he's a great punt option. Still not so much a punt option on our sponsor DraftKings, but short of a guy like Miguel Cabrera. Is $2,000 less. And one more thing I want to add, in addition to his BVP versus Smiley, is the fact that I brought this up the last time Smiley pitched, his first start, in which we were talking about him. The first time through the order, and this was back when he was in 2000 when he was a starter, he held opposing batters to something like a 190 average or something, but the second time through the order, he let opposing hitters hit close to 310, I think it was, off of him, which is not normal for a starting pitcher. And this guy, Smiley, he was dominant as a reliever, just doesn't profile as a starting pitcher to me. And while he did have a nice start in his last outing, I think that Kansas City is one of the sneakier stacks going tonight. So I agree with you about Butler. Another guy, don't know if he's in the lineup that just came out. Josh Satin, who I brought up yesterday, he's not even in the lineup, so don't consider him. That's really all I'm liking tonight.
Yeah, not a whole lot.
I mean, did we miss anyone? I know that Edwin Encarnacion, this is a guy I recommended in my article, and he has a really nice price on our sponsor DraftKings. I think he's only faced with Liriano one time in his career, but in that game, he hit 2 home runs out of 4 at bats. So his only hits have been home runs. It's not a difficult place to hit home runs if you can pull the ball out in Pittsburgh. I think that it's more of a GPP play, obviously, because Liriano, he's got some incredible stuff, one of the dirtiest pitchers in baseball, But if he doesn't have it working, he tends to get knocked around. So when he blows up in a big way, similar to Dickey, his counterpart tonight. So I think Edwin Encarnacion is definitely in play, especially on our sponsor, DraftKings, at only $4,000 price.
Yeah, I think that with the Jays there, I mentioned earlier that they're a great hitting team, and I'm a little worried about Lariano. He does have nasty stuff, one of the best changeups in baseball. But I think those numbers you could throw out the window because those Jays versus Lariano numbers were from his bad Minnesota days when he was horrible. The resurgent Lariano hasn't faced the Jays yet, so I think you could throw the BVPs out the window for that. But still, Jays are still in play because, like you said, when he's not on, he gets crushed by righties, and the Jays can certainly go after him.
Okay, yeah, but 4K on the site where you don't get docked for anything. I think as a high upside play, I would be more inclined to take a guy like uh, uh, Encarnacion at his price over even a Prince Fielder or a Billy Butler just because of the upside potential. So it's more of a GPP play. If you're looking for a safe, cheaper option, it's going to be Billy Butler, but. That's pretty much all I got. Anyone else you want to talk about?
Bono just asked us about Josh Satin and if I've given up on him. He did have, what, 2 singles and 2 walks? I mean, he did his job at that price getting on base. So I haven't given up on him, I guess. It was a solid effort, but I certainly don't love the fact that he can't hit for any power whatsoever. And going forward, he will be strictly a punt and a fantastic situation for me because I just don't see the upside when you punt a guy that basically might hit a couple of singles or walks. So what about you and Josh Satin?
Well, he's not even in the lineup tonight,
Yeah,
so
I just mean in general, because we talked about this is our last shot at him if he doesn't do something tonight.
well, he's probably going to get sent down if he's not in the lineup tonight against the lefty. So it's not a guy that I really lose much sleep over. He's a platoon player against lefties that doesn't really do much, but he's always got a nice, attractive price. But yeah, I don't really care about him either way. So it is what it is. All right, let's move on to second base.
All right, second base tonight. I mean, Chase Utley obviously in play. Rourke has trouble with lefties. We mentioned I like Howie Kendrick and Howard if you are good friends with him, which I'm not, so I'll call him Howie. He's in a good spot. I believe he's batting cleanup tonight. They're moving him all over the place. So Kendrick tonight, they got Calgary leading off, so Kendrick go back cleanup against Harrison. I like that. Brandon Phillips is a guy that's interesting. I'm not a big fan of him, but him hitting the no-out order, he's hit well off Gallardo. His price, dirt cheap across the industry, batting 3 between Votto and Bruce tonight. I think he makes a great punt play if he's as low as he is on some sites as he is on FanDuel. And a couple other guys I like too. Jeff Baker's a guy that hasn't really produced much, but has hit lefties well before. I think he's overrated, but his price right now, he's basically done nothing. He's rock bottom across the industry. He's going to face Paul Mulholland, who I think is going to get beat up by the righties in Miami there. So he's in play. Dan Uggla's a guy, too, that I think is probably more of a GPP play. Last time I mentioned Uggla, Boggs gave me some shit for it, and then all I did was hit 2 home runs that night, I think. But he's a guy that'll walk. He's got the big power upside. I like him tonight against Boggslite just because I don't believe in Boggslite at all. And for me, you're punting a position. You throw a couple of punts in, and one's that Dan Uggla type that could go off. That's gold to me in fantasy, but more so in a GPP, obviously, because in cash games, you want somebody to do something for you. LeMay, he was another guy you could probably punt, I guess, in Colorado. And Josh Harrison leading off for the Pirates. I'll let Boggs get into that a little bit more later here, but he's another guy, too, that can get on base and maybe steal a little bit. But for me, I think I'm on Kendrick or Utley. And if not, I'm punting it. And tonight, for me, is a perfect night to punt second base. With all the guys I want to fit my lineup, I'm punting second base tonight, and I'm going to go with one of these guys that I mentioned in the lower tiers here, Box.
Okay, yeah. I'm with you on Howie. He's probably my top option on our site, on our sponsor site, DraftKings. I even like him a little bit more tonight than I do, say, Chase Utley, and he's only $500 less, which is always a risky proposition. But a lot of people are going to see that, not going to be on Howie. He's batting cleanup, and he's going to have guys that can get on base in front of him. So he's going to have RBI opportunities. I did mention in my article earlier today that the reason it's a GPP play for me, though, is because you'll know by the first at-bat, probably the second at-bat, how Howie Kendrick's going to do in a particular game. If he's sitting back and taking those pitches that they throw to him out to right field, shooting in that gap, Howie's going to be in for a big night. You've already seen it. Both of his home runs came on opposite field bombs this year. But if he's trying to get out in front and pull the ball, he's going to ground into a ton of double plays. So it's really a hit or miss play. Batting fourth, a guy that's going to fly under the radar, just for whatever reason, because guys like Kinsler and Utley are there and they're more well-known, established names. I'm all over Howie tonight, and I'm with you though that Utley is definitely in play against Rourke, hitting at home. And while I did mention that I loved Omar Infante on FanDuel as a cash game play, I have a little bit of a problem paying up $4,200 for him on a site like DraftKings. He's just not a guy that's going to really light the world on fire for you. A solid cash game option. And going back to what I said about Butler, Smiley, Infante can definitely have like a 3-for-3 game. It's just he's not going to hit a bomb, especially in Kansas City. So I would be hesitant to pay up $4,200 for a guy like Infante on our sponsor DraftKings. But yeah, going down, you got Dan Ugla at only around $3K, and on a site like our sponsor, he can't burn you. So you're not going to have a negative 1.25 if he goes 0 for 5 like he's done so many times. But also Danny Valencia is down there at $2,600, second base eligibility. I think he's in a great spot. And we'll get to Harrison. He's listed as a third baseman on our sponsor site, DraftKings. But is there anyone else you want to talk about in terms of second baseman before we move on to third base?
Yeah, one of the guys in the chat was asked about Kinsler, Infante, Gordon. I liked them all. I think Kinsler is the best of that group. He does smash lefty. He's not in love with it tonight. As I said, I'm basically punting the position. Infante, you mentioned you liked them. What about D. Gordon? Your thoughts on him tonight? I mean, I think he's a solid play as well, but he's a guy that relies basically, for me, it's all about the stolen base, and he should be able to work his way on base against Mr. Turner there tonight. But I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of his price right now. He's hit really well, which is over his head, I think. And for me, he's got to go at least steal the base and score a run to make that kind of value. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I would be a little bit higher on him if Saul Telemakia was catching, but Jeff Mathis is definitely flies under the radar as one of the better defensive catchers in baseball. That's why the guy still has a job. Can't swing the bat to save his life, but he can. He's got a cannon of an arm. So I don't know too much about Turner and how his delivery to the plate is. I don't believe he's slow. He's a young pitcher. But you're right. D. Gordon's value is deliberately tied to whether or not he gets on base and whether or not he steals. So I would be a little hesitant, despite the fact that he has been doing both of that almost every game, and he's been doing a great job at it. But especially on our sponsor DraftKings, I'm not going to pay up $4,800 for a guy, even in a GPP, that his value is tied to stolen bases, and he's going against a right-handed pitcher that and a pitching catcher doing combo that can throw guys out. So I would much rather pay up for an Utley or even a Kinsler at that price, especially if Detroit can get to Danny Duffy early in that game. Kinsler is going to have opportunities against relievers, probably some righty relievers that aren't quick to the plate. So I could even see Kinsler having one or two bags, and you've got that home run potential and a lot more run potential from guys and better hitters behind him. So I don't hate the pick, but just know that Jeff Mathis he's a much better defensive catcher. That's why he's in the lineup to spell guys. So keep that in mind.
All right, moving on to shortstop, I guess.
Third base.
Want to go to third first?
Sure.
Third base, David Wright. I mean, this guy's got to hit at some point. If you can't hit Morales, I don't know what to tell you. I think he's in a great spot tonight. It's a great game. The Mets have been in Colorado a couple of days to adjust now. This is usually when the visiting team starts to hit that third day in. And, Wright's in the third spot. I think he's in a good spot tonight. Also love Nolan Arenado from that game. He's batting fifth tonight as opposed to his two spot, but still he's hit behind Cargo and Tulo. He's in a good spot as well. I like Casey McGee because I think all the right-handed bats in Miami are in play, as I said earlier. And two flyers will throw out their middle tiers that have hit the opposing pitcher pretty well are Aramis Ramirez and Todd Frazier. Both of those are GPP picks, but both are big upside. And like I said, have hit the opposing pitcher well. But for me, I'm looking at the Rockies-Mets game and going Arenado, then Wright. And I don't mind Casey McGee as well, but that's about all I'm liking at third base tonight.
Yeah, my top option is Going to be one of the three Colorado bats that are going to be in that lineup that I'm going to mention. It's Nolan Arenado. Sharknado Arenado is what his nickname is, and the guy, despite all the brilliant plays he's been making defensively, kind of quietly, I mean, has put together a 22-game hitting streak, which is pretty impressive, and it's tied for the third longest in team history. So the guy's just getting it done on both sides of the ball. I think Colorado, hands down, has the best left side of the infield in baseball, offensively and defensively, with Tulo and Arenado, and those guys are just so fun to watch. And you also take into account that for whatever reason, his price hasn't really skyrocketed. Now, he hasn't really been hitting the bombs that you would expect from a hot hitter, but his on base plus slugging is close to 800, which is anything over 750 is pretty good. And he's batting 309 with, like I mentioned, that 22-game hitting streak. So if you can get a hold of one off Henry Mejia, I think that Arenado is definitely a solid option in both cash games and GPPs. I also like David Wright. Just haven't been a fan of what the rest of his freaking team's been doing in front of him and behind him. And, you can kind of tell that he's trying to carry the load all by himself. That being said, I agree with you that, third night in, you should be used to that altitude by now, and going up against a guy like Franco Morales is more of a GPP play, but I think that David Wright is definitely up there in terms of my top third baseman tonight. Going down a peg, going down all the way, if you're looking to punt the position, my top option, it's not even going to be close. It's Josh Harrison. Not a guy that gets to start very many games, but he's a speedster. And if, like I mentioned, with a lot of these cheap Pittsburgh bats, if R.A. Dickey doesn't have that knuckleball dancing, Harrison is a guy that actually has some success against it in the past, and he can get on and easily steal a base or two. So I'm all over Josh Harrison at his rock bottom price across the industry. I think he's in for a big night, and I don't think anyone's going to be on him, especially in a GPP. So I mean, that's really all I'm really in love with. I did mention Danny Valencia as a nice cheap option as well. If you don't want to play that knuckleball out there in Pittsburgh, but Valencia is a guy that's going to get pinch hit for when they bring in a reliever later in the game in favor of Moustakas. So he's going to have to do his damage early in the count. Whereas Harrison, I'm fairly confident he'll finish that game because he doesn't get to start very many games at all. So that's who I'm liking. Anyone else you want to bring up?
No, we're good there.
All right, let's move on to shortstop. Tell me why. Yeah, go for it. You could finish.
What are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, tell me why Tulowitzki's not in play tonight.
Yeah, I'm just gonna basically say, to me, it's Troy Tulowitzki, and I'm paying up for him pretty much everywhere. If I'm not, I'm gonna strictly punt. I'm gonna write down a Ruben Tejada, who's a guy I like to use when I punt positions. He's got the lefty-righty matchup. He's batting in the 8-hole. Maybe he can start walking from the pitcher. He can steal a base. He can hit a double. I like Tejada as a complete punt, but I'm paying up for Tulo everywhere. You could argue that maybe he's not the best player on the board tonight, even though I probably think he is. But at his position, I mean, you can find value everywhere else. There's no value at shortstop. I mean, it's Tulo and nobody, in my opinion. So Tulo, Ruben Tejada, I'm done at shortstop.
Yeah, it's I don't need to spend too much time on it either. Tulo's my guy. And what I actually do like is that on our sponsor DraftKings, his price still continues to rise. So the ownership percentage isn't going to be what you expect because people definitely have a problem paying $6,000 for a shortstop. But this is a guy that's one of the best hitters in all of baseball, not just at the shortstop position. And it was an incredible point that you just made where you can find value everywhere else, but you really can't find consistent value at shortstop. So Tulo is definitely a guy, especially in your cash games where you don't want to fade. Don't be that guy, because if you're in a bunch of 50-50s and double-ups and you fade Tulo and he hits two bombs, you ain't going to be cashing. Let's put it that way. So I'm all over Tulo, and I agree with you. Hanley's still a little banged up with that hand. He's just a guy that I'm kind of taking the wait-and-see approach, unfortunately. Coming back to Miami, you'd think he'd be all over crushing those guys, but just really hasn't materialized, and he's not hitting the ball well. And then, Ruben Tejada, always a solid punt option, guy that is going to get you points because he's going to get those intentional walks, batting 8th in a National League lineup. But on our sponsor, DraftKings, he's the same price as Everth Cabrera. Would you play Ruben Tejada over Everth Cabrera tonight, Pepsi?
Wow. Probably not. I'd probably go with Everett Cabrera. I'm not a huge Cabrera fan, but he can get on base and he can steal bases, and that adds up pretty quick to run. And McCarthy's not an overpowering pitcher, so I'd probably give the lean to Cabrera there. But yeah, I can't believe they're the same price. Wow.
Yeah, I just noticed that right now, and I think definitely I would lean toward Cabrera, and that's despite the fact that I'm all over McCarthy tonight. You're right, he can get on, he can steal a bag, and he's just going to have more opportunities than a guy batting eighth in the lineup. So Cabrera would be my cheap punt option at that position tonight. And one more guy I want to bring up, who's just a peg above those guys, is Andrelton Simmons. What's your take on him?
Yeah, I don't mind Simmons. This is a guy that's really underachieved. I mean, he looked like a leadoff hitter, a little bit of pop in his back, and hit for some average, steal some bags. He's really underachieved a lot. So his price coming way down. Again, another guy batting eight. If he's in the similar range of a Tejada, I'd probably go with Simmons as well. But he's just been so bad recently. He just looks off of the plate. He's swinging at bad pitches. He just doesn't look comfortable. He's a mess to me right now. So I haven't really been on him for a while. His price is basically, on most sites, kind of stayed that middle tier range. So for me, I'm off him until his price becomes something in the rock bottom area and maybe moves from that lineup. But he's a guy I thought might be batting one or two most of the year. But, I mean, Hayward's been there, and then B.J. Upton, who probably doesn't deserve to be there, has locked up that two spot. So I'm kind of off Simmons right now until he gets going a little bit.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I would agree with you. I wouldn't play. I would lean Simmons over Tejada, but at that price range, I'm looking at Everett Cabrera, and a guy that leads off. That's where I would go if I'm punting the position on DraftKings tonight. All right, let's move on to outfield.
Outfield for me, very simple. The number one guy on the board tonight, I believe, is Mike Stanton. Mike Stanton. You see, I keep calling him Mike. Even in my articles, I'm writing down Mike. You can't change your name halfway through your career once you're established. It's just wrong. All right, Giancarlo Stanton is my number one guy tonight. I love him. I think he's in a great position. He's owned lefties. He's smashed Maholm. I think Maholm's walked him 5 times in like 11 plate appearances, so he clearly doesn't want to pitch to him. When he does, he takes him out of the park. So I love him. I also think Charlie Blackmon's a great spot tonight. Carr goes back in the lineup. Makes me a little nervous. You know, the knee tendonitis, the not hitting so well. I know he had a bomb his first game back, or no, last game in Colorado he had a bomb, but it barely went out. It wasn't a mammoth cargo shot, so it's one of those win-assisted homers. And that pinky finger that's been hit too is an issue. I assume he's fine. It wouldn't be the lineup, but he's in play for sure. But his price, I think that Blackmon and Stanton are ahead of him for me. Justin Upton's in play. He's also at Boggslite well and a great player. Obviously, his price has skyrocketed. Every Met and Rocky is in the lineup for me. Like, you know, even the cheap guys like Stubbs, Lagares leading off. I like all of them. Value-wise. First, I should mention Jason Hayward, who is the value on a lot of sites. Love Hayward too as well. Those brave lefty bats are in play. A couple of guys I'm going to mention for GPP purposes are for punting-wise. Gerardo Parra leading off for the Diamondbacks, and also Lou Venable, who I didn't check to see where he was in the lineup. Is Venable in? Venable is not in the lineup. Okay, I was expecting him to be hitting 1 or 2 against McCarthy there, but he is not. So we'll give up on Venable. But yeah, Gerardo Parra is a good spot. I think Stubbs is in a good spot, both at the top of the order there, both cheap guys. And basically, anytime you can get value, like I said before last night, out of that Colorado Mets game, there's going to be value, and basically all the value guys went off. It's just a great situation to be in. So top guys, Stanton, Upton, Blackmon, Mike Trout, of course. I should mention him. It's just too easy. The guy's amazing. He's got a bad left-handed pitcher. Well, Harrison's not bad, I guess. An average left-handed pitcher. I expect Trout to smash him tonight, rip a couple of hits, maybe a double, maybe he can get a home run tonight. He kind of disappointed a little bit last night, I think, but that's what I'm looking at. Also, one last thing, Reed Johnson, who's been a notorious lefty killer most of his career, leading off for the Marlins tonight against Maholm. I like it. I imagine he only gets his 3 at-bats like most punt platoon players, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had a couple hits or a hit and a walk and a couple runs scored at that dirt rock bottom price, I guess, dirt cheap, I'm trying to say. He's in a good spot there, too. So if you're looking to punt, guys like Parra and Reed Johnson, I would think are the 2 best guys. But love Hayward tonight and love Stanton as well there, Ross.
Yeah, I'm with you on all those guys. One thing I want to touch upon Blackman, which makes him my number one option, and Stanton my number two, is I was reading an article. It was posted on Fangraphs, and it was a couple days ago, but Charlie Blackman was ranked in the top 10 of every statistical category there is. The only guy in all of baseball to do so, including stolen bases. Obviously, Trout's not running as much this year, and it is an early sample size, but this kid is the real deal. And, there's been a lot of debate and season-long talk about should I sell high on him. I think he's going to last. This kid can absolutely mash, and you saw it last night. I think that he's going to continue his hot hitting ways. I think that Henry Maria, while he can strike guys out, is still a hittable pitcher. And like I said, Blackman get on base, steal a bag, just help your team out in a number of different ways. So Blackman's my number one. I do love Stan tonight. Took a page from your playbook, Pepsi, and when I wrote about it in my article today, I said it's not going to be a matter of how or whether or not Stanton hits Paul Mulholland. It's just going to be a matter of how far the ball flies. So I'm looking for Stanton to hit one of those towering record long distance home runs tonight. I think he's in a great spot. One guy I don't believe you brought up, you might have, but that I want to touch upon a little more too is Yasiel Puig. God, I really, I hate to say it because I'm not a big Puig guy. I think he's more of a detriment to his team in various ways in certain situations by the mental errors that he makes. But from a fantasy perspective, the guy's getting the job done. And what I really love is that when he gets on base, he's stealing. I did mention that Mathis is in the lineup, which not going to be as easy to steal, but I think he's going to be off to the races again tonight. And he's a guy that has the power in a combination with that speed. So I think Puig, he's still pretty moderately priced, not going to break your bank. And if you can't seem to get Blackman and Stanton in your lineup, along with Tulo and some of these other guys with good pitchers, Puig's a guy I would turn to that has that high upside, and he's been getting the job done with the bat as well. Also, totally agree with you about Hayward. All over him tonight. I think he's a solid value option. I don't know why his price is so low. I know he hasn't really been doing much, but I wouldn't hesitate to use Hayward in cash games. And I also completely agree with you about your Reed Johnson pick. Leading off at 2,200 on our sponsored DraftKings, doesn't get much better than that. I think he's going to play that whole game regardless. I think they're just going to give Christian Yelich the day off. Unless it's a late-inning situation where it's a close game. But he should get at least 3 at-bats, and if he can get on base, even against a lefty, he could steal a bag too. So I definitely like your Reed Johnson pick. Another guy leading off at a dirt cheap price is Colin Cowgill for the Angels. He could be in for a good spot, only 2,300 on our sponsored DraftKings tonight. And another guy that will likely play that whole game and get his fair share of at-bats as well. So those are the guys I like. Not so much in the middle tier other than Hayward. Obviously, a ton of guys are in play, but if you want to pay up for a Stanton and a Blackman and a Puig, in addition to Tulo, like I mentioned, you're going to have to find some of these value guys, and that's where I'm headed in that direction tonight. So is there anything else you want to add, Pepsi?
Just want to remind everybody that if you're looking for value, go to that Coors Field game. That's where runs will be scored. So maybe we'll look for some questions here in the last few minutes, boss.
All right, yeah, if we got anything, we only got about a minute left. And I know I do have some lineups to get to here. I'm sure you do as well. But, yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat right now.
As soon as I ask for them, I don't see a whole lot here. Guys, talk about Ugly versus.
And of course, we are delayed. Of course, we are delayed a bit. But either way, yeah, that's gonna wrap it. Let's go ahead and wrap things up here, Pepsi.
All right.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Another reminder that we are sponsored by the good guys over at DraftKings, and still a ton of overlay in some of these contests over there. So head over there and check it out. But other than that, Pepsi, you want to sign off with anything?
Hey, hopefully we helped you out, guys. Go win some money. Good luck, grinders.
All right. Good luck, grinders.